The wind screamed through the frozen pines like a wounded animal. 3 small bodies dangled from a wooden beam, their wrists bound with rough rope, their feet barely touching the snow below. Their lips had turned blue. Their fingers had stopped moving hours ago. The youngest one, barely 6 years old, had closed her eyes. She wasn't sleeping. She was giving up. No one was supposed to find them out here. That was the plan. Leave them in the middle of nowhere, miles from any road, any house, any hope. Let the cold do what cruelty had started. By morning, there would be nothing left but 3 frozen statues in the wilderness. But someone was coming, and he had no idea what he was about to discover. Marcus Webb gripped the steering wheel of his SUV as the blizzard intensified. Beside him, in the passenger seat, a large German shepherd named Titan sat perfectly still, his dark eyes scanning the white chaos ahead. Marcus was supposed to be in Chicago right now, sitting in a boardroom, signing papers worth millions. Instead, he was lost on a mountain road in Montana, his GPS dead, his phone signal gone, and his patience wearing thin. He was the CEO of Webb Industries, one of the largest construction companies in the Midwest. He built skyscrapers. He commanded thousands of employees. He had dined with senators and shaken hands with presidents. But out here, in the teeth of this storm, he was just a man. A man who had made a wrong turn 3 hours ago and now couldn't find his way back. Titan let out a low whine. Marcus glanced at him. The dog's ears were forward, alert. Something had caught his attention. "What is it, boy?" Marcus asked. Titan pressed his nose against the window, fogging the glass with his breath. Then he barked, once, twice, 3 times. Marcus slowed the SUV to a crawl. Through the swirling snow, he could barely see 10 feet ahead, but Titan's instincts had never been wrong. This dog had been trained by the military before Marcus adopted him from a veteran's shelter 2 years ago. Titan could smell danger. He could sense distress. And right now, every muscle in his body was tense. Marcus stopped the vehicle and killed the engine. The silence that followed was almost worse than the howling wind. He pulled his heavy coat tighter and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath for a moment. Titan jumped out behind him, his paws sinking into the deep snow. Without hesitation, the dog began moving forward, nose to the ground, pulling through drifts that reached his chest. "Titan, wait!" Marcus called, but the dog didn't stop. Something was wrong. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. Marcus followed, struggling through the snow, his lungs burning in the frozen air. Titan led him off the road and into the trees, weaving between the pines with a determination that seemed almost desperate. The dog had found a scent, a trail, and whatever was at the end of it couldn't wait. After 10 minutes of brutal hiking, Marcus saw it. At first, his mind refused to process what his eyes were showing him. It didn't make sense. It couldn't be real. 3 small figures hanging from a beam that connected 2 old wooden posts, their arms stretched above them, their bodies limp, their clothes thin and inadequate for this brutal weather. Children. 3 little girls, left to freeze. Marcus's legs nearly gave out beneath him. He had seen many terrible things in his 52 years of life. He had watched his own father waste away from cancer. He had held his wife's hand as she took her last breath. He had buried his only son after a car accident that should never have happened. But this was something else entirely. "Dear God," he whispered. "Dear God, no!" Titan reached the girls first. He circled beneath them, whining, pawing at the snow, his tail low. The dog knew. Animals always know. Marcus forced himself to move. His hands were already numb, but he didn't care. He reached the first girl, the oldest, maybe 10 or 11 years old. Her eyes were closed, but when he touched her face, they fluttered open. She was alive, barely, but alive. "It's okay," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "I'm here. I'm going to get you down. Hold on. Just hold on." He pulled the knife from his pocket, the one he always carried for emergencies, and began cutting the rope that bound her wrists. The fibers were frozen, stiff, and it took precious seconds to saw through them. When the rope finally gave way, the girl collapsed into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, just skin and bones wrapped in a thin dress that offered no protection against the elements. How long had they been out here? Hours? A full day. The fact that any of them were still breathing was nothing short of a miracle. Marcus laid her gently in the snow and moved to the second girl. This one was younger, maybe 8. Her lips moved silently, forming words he couldn't hear. When he cut her down, she clung to him with surprising strength, her frozen fingers digging into his coat. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." The third girl, the youngest, didn't move when he freed her. Her body was limp, her eyes closed, her chest barely rising. Marcus pressed his fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse. For a moment he felt nothing. Then there it was. Faint, irregular, but present. She wasn't gone yet. There was still time. He gathered all 3 of them in his arms somehow and began the treacherous journey back to his SUV. Titan ran ahead, breaking a path through the drifts, barking encouragement. The weight of 3 small bodies should have been unbearable, but Marcus didn't feel it. Adrenaline, fear, and something else, something deeper, carried him forward. When he finally reached the vehicle, his whole body was shaking. He placed the girls in the back seat, cranked the heat to maximum, and wrapped them in every blanket and piece of clothing he could find. Then he radioed for help on his satellite emergency beacon. "This is Marcus Webb," he said into the device. "I have 3 children in critical condition, possible hypothermia. I need immediate medical evacuation. Please, if anyone can hear me, I need help." Static. Then, after an eternity, a voice. "Mr. Webb, this is search and rescue. We're tracking your signal. Helicopter is en route. ETA 45 minutes. Keep them warm. Keep them alive." 45 minutes. In this cold, with these injuries, 45 minutes felt like a death sentence. Marcus climbed into the back seat with the girls. Titan jumped in beside him, adding his body heat to theirs. The oldest girl opened her eyes again and looked at Marcus with an expression that broke his heart. "He said no one would find us," she whispered. "He said we would disappear forever." "Who?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice gentle. "Who did this to you?" But the girl's eyes were already closing again. She didn't have the strength to answer. Marcus held them close as the minutes crawled by. The youngest girl's breathing grew more shallow. Her pulse weakened. He could feel her slipping away, and there was nothing he could do but pray. "Stay with me," he begged. "Please, stay with me." Titan pressed his warm nose against the little girl's cheek and whined softly. The dog understood. In his own way, he was trying to help too. When the helicopter finally appeared over the trees, its spotlight cutting through the blizzard, Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. He hadn't cried in years, not since Sarah died, not since the funeral for his son. But now, with these 3 small lives in his arms, the dam finally broke. The rescue team took over with professional efficiency. They loaded the girls onto stretchers, started IV lines, wrapped them in heating blankets. Marcus stood in the snow, watching, his body finally registering how cold and exhausted he truly was. A paramedic approached him. "Sir, you need to come with us too. You're showing signs of hypothermia." Marcus shook his head. "I'm fine. Just take care of them, please." But the paramedic was insistent, and eventually Marcus found himself in the helicopter too, wrapped in his own blanket, Titan lying at his feet. As the aircraft lifted off and turned toward the hospital, Marcus looked down at the spot where he had found the girls. Those wooden posts, that beam. Someone had built that. Someone had planned this. And when Marcus found out who, there would be a reckoning. The next 12 hours were a blur of hospital corridors, beeping machines, and whispered consultations between doctors. The girls were in critical condition, all 3 of them, but they were fighters. The oldest one, whose name turned out to be Emma, woke up first. She was dehydrated, malnourished, and suffering from severe frostbite on her fingers and toes, but she was going to survive. The middle child, Lily, regained consciousness a few hours later. She had the same hollow look in her eyes as her sister, the look of someone who had seen too much darkness for her young years. The youngest, Sophie, remained unconscious for almost 2 days. When she finally opened her eyes, the doctors called it a miracle. Another hour in that cold, they said, and she would have been beyond saving. Marcus never left the hospital. He slept in the waiting room. He ate vending machine food. He answered questions from police detectives and social workers and hospital administrators. And every few hours, when the nurses allowed it, he visited the girls. They didn't have parents. That much became clear very quickly. Emma, Lily, and Sophie were sisters, orphaned when their mother died of an overdose 3 years ago. Their father had never been in the picture. They had been in and out of foster homes ever since, bouncing from one temporary placement to another, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. Their most recent foster parents, a couple named Harold and Margaret Vance, had reported them missing 4 days before Marcus found them. But the police were already suspicious of their story. Something didn't add up. The Vances claimed the girls had run away, but there were no footprints in the snow around their property. No signs of forced departure. No reason for 3 young girls to flee into the wilderness in the middle of winter. Detective Carolyn Reyes was assigned to the case. She was a 20-year veteran of the force, tough and uncompromising, with a particular hatred for crimes against children. When she interviewed Emma for the first time, she kept her voice soft and her questions gentle. "Emma, can you tell me what happened? How did you end up in those woods?" Emma's hands trembled as she clutched the hospital blanket. "Mr. Vance," she whispered, "he took us there. He said we were too much trouble. He said we cost too much money. He said nobody would ever want us, so he was going to make us disappear." The detective's jaw tightened. "He tied you up? Left you there?" Emma nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He said the snow would cover us by morning. He said no one would ever find us. He said it was for the best." The interview was recorded, every word, every detail, and by the end of the day, Harold Vance was in handcuffs. But that wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Marcus Webb had built his career on solving problems. When a construction project hit a snag, he found a way around it. When a deal fell through, he negotiated a new one. When obstacles appeared in his path, he removed them. But this situation was different. These were children. These were broken lives. And Marcus had no idea how to fix them. He visited Emma, Lily, and Sophie every day during their recovery. He brought them books, toys, puzzles. He sat with them while they ate their meals. He listened when they wanted to talk and stayed silent when they didn't. Titan came with him every time, and the girls adored the dog. Sophie, the youngest, would bury her face in Titan's fur and whisper secrets that only he could hear. "Why do you keep coming back?" Emma asked one afternoon. She was the suspicious one, the protector. She had learned early in life that adults couldn't be trusted. Marcus thought carefully before answering. "Because I found you," he said, "and I feel responsible for you. Does that make sense?" "No," Emma said flatly. "People don't just help kids like us. There's always a catch." Marcus's heart ached at those words. How many times had these girls been disappointed? How many people had promised them safety and then failed to deliver? No wonder Emma couldn't trust anyone. "There's no catch," he said quietly. "I just want you to be okay, all 3 of you." Emma studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a start. The trial of Harold Vance began 2 months later. The courtroom was packed with reporters, social workers, and members of the public who had followed the story with growing outrage. The prosecutor laid out the case in devastating detail. Vance had taken in foster children for years, not out of kindness, but for the monthly checks from the state. He had neglected them. He had abused them. And when the girls became too difficult to manage, he had decided to eliminate them entirely. His wife, Margaret, had cooperated with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. She testified that Harold had planned the whole thing. He had scouted the location weeks in advance. He had waited for the storm to provide cover. He had carried the girls to that remote spot himself, bound their wrists, and left them to freeze. He said they were just throwaways, Margaret testified, her voice trembling. He said nobody would miss them. Nobody would even look. The defense tried to argue mental illness, diminished capacity, anything to reduce the charges. But the jury wasn't buying it. After only 3 hours of deliberation, they returned with a verdict, guilty, on all counts. Harold Vance would spend the rest of his life behind bars. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Marcus was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. He watched Vance's face as the words sank in, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched the reality of his new future settle over him like a shroud. There was no satisfaction in it, Marcus realized, no sense of victory, just a hollow ache where justice should have felt like triumph. After the trial, the girls' case went back to the foster care system. They would be placed in a new home with new caregivers, and the cycle would begin again. Marcus couldn't accept that. He spent sleepless nights thinking about it, turning the problem over in his mind, searching for another solution. Then, one evening, it came to him. He picked up the phone and called his lawyer. "I want to adopt them," he said, "all 3 of them." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Marcus, are you sure about this? You're a single man. You have no experience with children. The courts are going to scrutinize every aspect of your life." "Let them scrutinize," Marcus said. "I don't care. Those girls need a home, a real home, and I'm going to give it to them." The adoption process was long and complicated. There were home studies, background checks, interviews, and mountains of paperwork. The social workers questioned whether a wealthy CEO with a demanding career could provide the stability these traumatized children needed. Marcus answered every question honestly. He didn't pretend to have all the answers. He just knew that he couldn't walk away. Titan helped, actually. The social workers noted how comfortable the girls were with the dog, how Titan seemed to have a calming effect on their anxiety. One of them even wrote in her report that the bond between Sophie and Titan was therapeutic in nature. Finally, after 8 months of waiting, the adoption was approved. Marcus will never forget the day he brought Emma, Lily, and Sophie home for the first time. His house was huge, maybe too huge for just one person and a dog. But now it would be filled with life, with laughter, with the chaos and noise of 3 young girls learning what it meant to have a real family. Emma stood in the doorway, looking around with wide eyes. "This is all yours?" she asked. "This is all ours," Marcus corrected gently. "Everything I have is yours now. You're not guests here. You're home." Lily ran through the rooms, touching everything, marveling at the space. Sophie just held onto Titan's collar, content to let the dog lead her wherever he wanted to go. It wasn't easy. Those first few months were filled with challenges. The girls had nightmares. They struggled to trust that Marcus wouldn't abandon them. Emma pushed back against every rule, testing him, waiting for the moment when he would give up like everyone else had. But Marcus didn't give up. He hired a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma. He adjusted his work schedule to be present for dinners, homework, and bedtime stories. He learned how to braid hair, badly at first, but he improved. He sat through school plays and parent-teacher conferences and arguments about curfews. And slowly, gradually, the walls began to come down. The first time Sophie called him Dad was an accident. She was reaching for a cookie jar on a high shelf and needed help. "Dad, can you get that?" she asked, then froze, realizing what she had said. Marcus's heart stopped. He turned to look at her, saw the fear in her eyes, the worry that she had crossed a line. "Of course, sweetheart," he said, reaching for the jar. "What kind do you want?" He acted like it was nothing, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But later that night, after the girls were asleep, he sat in his study with Titan at his feet and cried. Happy tears this time, healing tears. Emma took longer. She was 12 now, old enough to remember everything, too old to forget. But one evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, she finally spoke the words Marcus had been waiting to hear. I trust you, she said quietly. I wasn't sure I ever would, but I do. Marcus didn't say anything. He just put his arm around her and let the moment speak for itself. Years passed. The girls grew up. Emma graduated high school as valedictorian and went on to study law, determined to help other children trapped in the system. Lily discovered a passion for art and earned a scholarship to a prestigious design school. Sophie, the quiet one, the one who had almost slipped away in the snow, became a veterinarian. She said Titan had inspired her. She wanted to help animals the way he had helped her. Titan lived to be 14 years old. When he finally passed, the whole family gathered around him, holding him as he took his last breath. They buried him in the backyard beneath a tree that Sophie had planted years ago. He was the first one to find us, Emma said, at the small ceremony they held. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here. We owe him everything. Marcus nodded, unable to speak through the lump in his throat. Titan had been more than a dog. He had been a partner, a hero, and a bridge between a broken man and 3 broken girls. The girls never forgot where they came from. They never forgot the cold, the fear, the despair of those hours in the wilderness. But they also never forgot the warmth that came after, the hot chocolate and the blankets, the hospital room where they woke up to find a stranger who wouldn't leave their side, the moment when they finally understood what it meant to be loved. Marcus Webb retired from Webb Industries at 65. He had enough money to last several lifetimes, but that wasn't what mattered anymore. What mattered was Sunday dinners with his daughters. What mattered was playing with his grandchildren. What mattered was knowing that 3 lives, 3 precious lives that had almost been extinguished in a blizzard, were now thriving because he had taken a wrong turn on a mountain road. He often wondered about that. The wrong turn, the dead GPS, the storm that should have kept him indoors. If any of those things had been different, he never would have found them. Emma, Lily, and Sophie would have died in the snow, just as Harold Vance had planned. Their story would have ended in tragedy. But it didn't, because sometimes what looks like a mistake is actually a miracle in disguise. Sometimes the path you never meant to take leads you exactly where you need to be. And sometimes 3 little girls who should have been lost forever are found by a man and his dog who had no idea they were searching for their own salvation. On the 10th anniversary of the rescue, the family returned to Montana. They hiked to the spot where Marcus had found the girls, now just a clearing in the woods, the wooden posts long since rotted away. They stood in silence, remembering, honoring the moment that had changed all of their lives. I was so cold, Sophie whispered, now a grown woman with children of her own. I thought I was dreaming when Titan found us. I thought I had already died. But you didn't die, Marcus said. You survived. You all survived. And you're going to keep surviving, long after I'm gone. Emma took his hand. You saved us, Dad. You and Titan. You gave us everything. Marcus shook his head. No, you saved me. I was a lonely old man with too much money and not enough purpose. You gave me a reason to live. You gave me a family. They stayed in that clearing until sunset, watching the sky turn orange and pink above the mountains. Then, together, they walked back to the car and drove toward home. The world is full of stories that end in darkness, stories of children abandoned, forgotten, left behind by a society that should have protected them. But this isn't one of those stories. This is a story of survival, of redemption, of love that defies the coldest winters and the cruelest intentions. 3 poor girls left hanging to die in the snow, and a CEO with his canine who showed up exactly when they were needed most. Because that's how miracles work. They don't arrive when we expect them. They don't follow schedules or logic. They appear in the middle of blizzards, on wrong turns, in moments when hope seems lost forever. And they change everything. If you're watching this video right now and you feel like no one would notice if you disappeared, I want you to know something. You matter. Your life has value. And somewhere out there, someone is looking for you, even if they don't know it yet. Don't give up. Hold on. Because your rescue might be just around the corner, hidden in a storm, carried on the paws of a faithful dog. This is the power of fate. This is the strength of the human spirit. And this is a reminder that even in the coldest darkness, warmth can always be found. Hold on to hope. It never lets go of you.